Across the long corridors of history, there are individuals whose lives reshape the destiny of entire civilizations. Men whose decisions echo through centuries. Men whose faith becomes the foundation upon which nations rise. One such man lived nearly 4,000 years ago. He owned no empire. He commanded no army. He wrote no laws. Yet today, billions of people across the world trace their spiritual heritage back to him. His name was Abraham. His story begins not in power, but in obedience, not in certainty, but in faith. And it begins in one of the oldest cities ever known to human history, the city of Ur. Around the early 2nd millennium before Christ, Abraham, then called Abram, lived among the great civilizations of Mesopotamia. Ur was a thriving urban center. Its streets were filled with merchants. Its temples rose high above the city, and its people worshipped many gods. But according to the biblical narrative, Abram encountered something radically different, the voice of the one true God. The divine command was astonishing. Leave your country, leave your family, leave everything familiar, and go to a land that I will show you. The destination was not revealed. The map was not provided. The promise was the only certainty. I will make you into a great nation, and through you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. It was an invitation that required absolute trust, and Abram accepted. He left the comfort of Ur and began a journey that would lead him across deserts, mountains, and foreign lands. Eventually, he arrived in the land of Canaan, a land that would later become central to the history of Israel. Once Abram arrived in Canaan, God made a covenant with him. A covenant is more than a promise. It is a sacred agreement that binds two parties together. God promised to Abram three extraordinary things. First, land. The land of Canaan would belong to his descendants. Second, descendants. Though Abram had no children, God promised that his offspring would become as numerous as the stars in the sky. Third, blessing. Through Abram's lineage, blessing would reach all nations of the earth. This was no ordinary promise. It was the beginning of a historical and spiritual movement that would shape Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Yet there was one problem. Abram and his wife Sarah were already old, and they had no children. Years passed, then decades. The promise seemed impossible. Human reason suggested the covenant would never be fulfilled. At one point, Abram even questioned God directly. "Lord, what will you give me, seeing I go childless?" But the divine response was profound. God brought Abram outside and told him to look at the night sky. "Count the stars, if you are able to number them. So shall your descendants be." Then the scripture records a statement that would become one of the most important theological ideas in the entire Bible. Abram believed the Lord, and it was counted to him as righteousness. Faith, not power, was the foundation of Abram's relationship with God. Later, God confirmed the covenant again, but this time something changed. Abram's name was transformed. He would now be called Abraham, which means father of many nations. His wife Sarai was also given a new name, Sarah. The covenant was now sealed through a Sinin circumcision, which would mark Abraham's descendants for generations. Yet still, the promised child had not arrived. Finally, when Abraham was nearly 100 years old, the impossible happened. Sarah gave birth to a son. They named him Isaac. The name Isaac means laughter, because when Sarah first heard the promise that she would bear a child in old age, she laughed in disbelief. Yet that laughter became joy. Isaac represented the fulfillment of God's promise, but the story of Abraham was not yet complete, because his faith would soon face its greatest test. One day, God gave Abraham a command that has echoed through theological debates for centuries. "Take your son Isaac, your only son, the son whom you love, and offer him as a sacrifice." The journey took 3 days. 3 days of silence, 3 days of unimaginable tension. Finally, Abraham and Isaac reached the mountain known as Mount Moriah. Abraham built an altar, prepared the wood, and lifted the knife. But at the final moment, a voice called out from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham." The test was complete. A ram caught in a nearby thicket was provided as the sacrifice instead. The message was clear. Faith had triumphed, and the covenant would continue. Abraham eventually died at the age of 175. But his influence did not end there. Through Isaac came the lineage of Israel. Through Israel came prophets, kings, and the scriptures. And centuries later, Christians would see the fulfillment of Abraham's covenant in Jesus Christ. Today, Abraham is remembered as the father of faith, honored in Judaism, respected in Christianity, revered in Islam. Few individuals in human history have shaped the spiritual consciousness of the world so profoundly. The story of Abraham is ultimately not about wealth, power, or conquest. It is about trust. Trust in a promise that seemed impossible. Trust in a journey without a map. Trust in a God who calls ordinary people into extraordinary destinies. From the deserts of ancient Canaan to the millions who read his story today, the legacy of Abraham continues, because sometimes the most powerful force in history is not an empire. It is faith. God bless you.